One man, born into poverty on the endless grasslands of Mongolia, abandoned by his tribe, left to starve with his mother and siblings, he would rise from nothing to conquer more territory than any ruler in human history. 25% of the world's population would fall under his dominion. He would kill millions, yet create laws protecting women and religious freedom centuries before the West. His name was Temujin. The world would come to know him as Genghis Khan. This is not the story you think you know. This is the untold story of the Mongol Empire. The year is 1162. On the windswept steppes of Mongolia, near the Onon River, a child enters the world clutching a blood clot in his fist. The shamans whisper that this is an omen. This boy will be a great warrior. His father, Yesugei, a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan, names him Temujin, after a Tatar warrior he has recently captured. But omens mean nothing when you're born into a world of constant warfare, bitter cold, and unforgiving landscapes. Mongolia in the 12th century is not a unified nation. It is a patchwork of nomadic tribes constantly at war with one another. The Merkits, the Tatars, the Naimans, the Khanates. Each tribe fights for survival on land that offers little mercy. The Mongolian steppe stretches endlessly in every direction. In summer, temperatures soar above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In winter, they plummet to 40 below zero. There are no cities, no permanent settlements, only gurs, the round felt tents that can be packed and moved when the grass runs out or enemies approach. Life revolves around livestock. Horses, sheep, goats, cattle, and camels are everything. They provide food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. A family's wealth is measured not in gold or land, but in animals. The Mongols drink fermented mare's milk called arag. They eat mutton and dried meat. They wear thick wool deals, long robes that protect against the brutal elements. Children learn to ride before they can walk. By age 3, a Mongol child sits confidently on horseback. By 5, they can shoot arrows while galloping. Temujin's early childhood is relatively comfortable by steppe standards. His father is respected, if not powerful. The family has enough animals to survive. But when Temujin is 9 years old, everything changes. Yesugei takes his son on a journey to find him a bride among the Khwarazmian tribe, his mother's people. This is customary. Mongol marriages are arranged young to forge alliances between clans. They arrive at the camp of Dai Sishen, who has a daughter named Borte. She is a year older than Temujin, but Dai Sechen sees potential in the boy. The betrothal is agreed upon. According to tradition, Temujin will remain with his future in-laws to work and prove his worth. But Yesugei never makes it home. On his return journey, he encounters a group of Tatars. The Tatars and Yesugei's clan have been blood enemies for generations. They have killed each other's fathers and brothers. When the Tatars recognize Yesugei, they invite him to share a meal. He accepts, perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps believing he can pass safely. It is a fatal mistake. The Tatars poison his food. Yesugei manages to ride home, but the poison is already working. He dies in agony, calling for his son. News reaches Temujin. He rushes home but arrives too late. His father is dead, and with Yesugei gone, the family's protection vanishes overnight. In Mongol society, power is personal, not institutional. Without a strong patriarch, the family means nothing. The tribe that once followed Yesugei abandons his widow and children. They pack up their gurs and move away, leaving Temujin, his mother Hoelun, his brothers and his half-brothers to die. Hoelun refuses to accept this fate. She is a woman of extraordinary strength and intelligence. She grabs the tribal standard, a horsehair banner symbolizing unity, and rides after the departing clan, shaming them for their cowardice. A few families hesitate, but ultimately they all leave. Hoelun and her children are alone. What follows are years of desperate poverty. They survive on wild plants, berries, roots, and fish caught in the river. They hunt marmots and field mice. In winter, they nearly freeze. In summer, they go hungry. Temujin's younger brothers sometimes cry from starvation. The family that once had status is now lower than slaves. At least slaves have masters who feed them. Hoelun's family has no one. During these years, Temujin learns lessons that will shape his destiny. He learns that tribal loyalty is conditional. He learns that the strong devour the weak. He learns that survival requires ruthlessness. And he learns to hate the arbitrary hierarchies that condemned his family to death simply because his father was gone. One incident from this period reveals the darkness growing inside young Temujin. He and his brothers are fishing in the Onan River when his half-brother Bektar steals a fish that Temujin caught. It is a small thing, but on the edge of starvation, every morsel matters. Temujin's rage is volcanic. He and his full brother Khazar stalk Bektar into the hills. They find him sitting on a ridge. Bektar knows why they've come. He sits calmly and asks only that they spare his younger brother Belgutay. Temujin and Khazar shoot Bektar with arrows, killing him. When they return home, Holun is horrified. She calls Temujin a destroyer, a wild beast. She knows that in killing his half-brother, Temujin has violated the most sacred bond, the bond of family. But Temujin feels no remorse. In his mind, Bektar threatened the family's survival. That was unforgivable. This is the calculus that will define Genghis Khan. Loyalty to the group above all. Those who threaten the group must be eliminated, no matter who they are. But Temujin's troubles are far from over. The Taichiud clan, former allies of his father, see the young man as a potential threat. They remember the prophecy at his birth. They fear he will seek revenge for his family's abandonment. So they decide to capture him and eliminate the problem. They raid Holun's camp at dawn, scattering the family. Temujin tries to escape into the forest, but he is caught. The Taichids place a wooden yoke around his neck, a heavy cane that makes it impossible to move freely. He is paraded from camp to camp, a humiliated prisoner. But Temujin is resourceful. During a feast, when his captors are drunk on arug, he strikes one of his guards with the kangwe and runs. He dives into a river and hides beneath the surface, breathing through reeds. A young man from the Taichiud camp named Shilan discovers him, but says nothing. Later that night, Shilan and his father help Temujin remove the kangwe and provide him with a horse and supplies. They risk their lives to help him. Temujin never forgets this. Years later, Shilan will become one of his most trusted generals. Temujin returns to his family, but he knows he cannot remain weak. He begins to build alliances. His first step is to marry Borte. He travels back to Daesachen and claims his bride. Borte brings with her a dowry, a luxurious black sable coat. This coat will change Temujin's life. He takes it as a gift to Togrul, also known as Khan, the leader of the powerful Kharite tribe. Togrul was once an ally, or Anda, a sworn brother, of Temujin's father. Temujin appeals to this bond. He presents the sable coat and asks Togrul to remember Yesugei's friendship. Togrul is impressed by the young man's courage and accepts him as a vassal. This alliance gives Temujin legitimacy. He is no longer a nobody. He is under the protection of one of the most powerful men on the steppe. Slowly, people begin to join him. Old friends of his father, young warriors seeking opportunity, outcasts and adventurers. Temujin treats them well, sharing what little he has. He promotes men based on merit, not birth. This is revolutionary. In traditional Mongol society, your bloodline determines your rank, but Temujin values ability above all else. Then disaster strikes again. The Merkits have not forgotten that Yesugei once kidnapped Hoilun from them. They want revenge. They raid Temujin's camp, capturing Borte and taking her away. Temujin is devastated. Borte is not just his wife. She is his partner, his confidant, the one person who chose to stand by him when he had nothing. He vows to get her back, no matter the cost. He calls on Togrul for help. He also reaches out to Yamuka, his childhood friend, another rising young leader. Jamuka agrees to help. Together, they assemble a force of 20,000 warriors and attack the Merkits. The raid is swift and brutal. They slaughter the Merkit warriors, burn their camps, and rescue Borte. Temujin is reunited with his wife, but she is pregnant. Months later, she gives birth to a son, Jochi. For the rest of his life, rumors will swirl about whether Jochi is truly Temujin's son or the result of her captivity. Temujin publicly claims Jochi as his own, but the whispers never stop. This unresolved question will poison relationships within the family for decades. Despite this personal turmoil, Temujin's reputation grows. He has proven he can lead men in battle. He has shown loyalty to his followers and ruthlessness toward his enemies. More warriors flock to his banner, but his friendship with Jamuka begins to fracture. The two men are too similar, too ambitious. Both want to lead. Both believe they are destined for greatness. Small disagreements become arguments. Arguments become resentments. Finally, they part ways. Many of Jamuka's followers defect to Temujin, angering Jamuka further. The break between them will lead to years of conflict. Jamuka, once Temujin's closest friend, becomes his greatest rival. And in the crucible of this rivalry, Temujin will transform from a minor chieftain into something the world has never seen before. A unifier, a conqueror, a man who will reshape the entire world. By the 1190s, the Mongolian steppe is a chessboard of shifting alliances and blood feuds. Temujin is now in his 30s, a seasoned warrior with a growing following, but he is not yet supreme. The steppe is dominated by several powerful figures. Togrul of the Khanates, Jamuka, who has formed his own confederation, the Naiman tribe in the west, rich and powerful, the Tatars in the east, still numerous despite their wars, and dozens of smaller clans, each maneuvering for survival. Mongol politics are governed by ancient customs. The most important of these is the election of a Khan. When a leader proves his worth, the chiefs of various clans gather in a Kurultai, a great assembly, to proclaim him. But this is not a democratic process. It is a recognition of power. If you command enough warriors, if you have won enough battles, if you can keep your followers fed and enriched, then you will be chosen Khan. If you cannot, you will be overthrown or killed. Temujin understands this. He knows that loyalty must be rewarded. After every victory, he distributes the spoils generously. Horses, livestock, captives, and grazing rights go to his commanders and soldiers. He keeps relatively little for himself. This is strategic. In a nomadic society, wealth is meaningless if you cannot defend it. But loyalty is everything. And Temujin buys loyalty not with fear alone, but with opportunity. Men who join him rise quickly if they prove capable. Birth and aristocratic lineage matter less in his army than skill and dedication. This meritocratic approach is radical. Traditional Mongol society is deeply hierarchical. If you are born into a noble clan, you lead. If you are born common, you follow. Temujin shatters this system. One of his closest companions is Jebi, who once shot Temujin's horse out from under him in battle. After Jebi's side lost, he could have been executed. Instead, Temujin was impressed by his skill and honesty. He gave Jebi a new horse and made him a commander. Jebi, which means arrow, would become one of the greatest generals in history. Another key figure is Subutai, the son of a blacksmith. In traditional society, Subutai would never command armies, but Temujin recognizes his genius for strategy and logistics. Subutai will go on to conquer more territory than any general in history, leading campaigns from Korea to Poland. But Temujin's rise is not smooth. Jamuka is determined to stop him. Around 1190, Jamuka assembles a coalition of tribes and attacks Temujin at the Battle of Dalan Balzut. Temujin is outnumbered and defeated. His forces scatter. Jamuka captures many prisoners and, to send a message, he boils 70 young noblemen alive in giant cauldrons. This act of cruelty backfires. Many Mongols are horrified. Some of Jamuka's own followers defect to Temujin, believing that Jamuka is unstable and violates the warrior code. Even in defeat, Temujin gains strength because he is seen as more honorable than his rival. Temujin also navigates the complex politics of the region with cunning. The Jin dynasty in northern China, one of the wealthiest and most powerful states in the world, plays the Mongol tribes against each other. The Jin emperors subsidize certain tribes to raid others, keeping the steppe divided and weak. Temujin initially plays along, but he is learning. He sees how the Jin manipulate his people. He begins to envision a different future, one where the Mongols are united and strong enough to challenge empires. His next major test comes with the Tatars. The Tatars are the tribe that murdered his father. Temujin has never forgotten this. When Togrul and Temujin launch a campaign against the Tatars, it is as much about revenge as it is about power. The campaign is successful. The Tatar forces are crushed. But what happens next reveals Temujin's ruthless pragmatism. He orders the execution of every Tatar male taller than a cart axle. This means every man and teenage boy is killed. Women and young children are absorbed into Temujin's tribe. It is a brutal act, but it serves a purpose. It eliminates a source of future resistance. It avenges his father, and it sends a clear message to other tribes. Submit or be annihilated. The Jin dynasty, pleased with the defeat of the Tatars, grants Temujin and Togrul minor titles. These titles mean little in practical terms, but they add a veneer of legitimacy. Temujin is no longer just a tribal warlord. He is recognized, however minimally, by a great empire. But Temujin's relationship with Togrul begins to deteriorate. Togrul's son, Sengum, despises Temujin. He sees him as an upstart, a threat to his own inheritance. Sengum poisons his father's mind against Temujin, claiming that Temujin plots to overthrow the khanates. In 1203, Sengum lures Temujin into a trap under the pretense of a marriage alliance. Temujin narrowly escapes an ambush, but his forces are scattered. He retreats with only a handful of loyal followers to the remote Lake Baljuna. At Baljuna, Temujin's future hangs by a thread. He is reduced to less than 20 men. They drink the muddy water of the lake and swear an oath. Those who remain loyal now in the darkest hour will be rewarded beyond measure when fortune turns. This moment becomes legendary. The men who drink the water of Baljuna, the Baljunatu, will form the core of Temujin's inner circle for the rest of their lives. They include Mongols, but also a Muslim merchant, a Christian, and warriors from various backgrounds. Temujin does not care about ethnicity or religion. He cares about loyalty. And fortune does turn. Togrul and Sengum grow complacent. They believe Temujin is finished, but Temujin uses this underestimation against them. He gathers his scattered forces, appeals to disaffected Kharite nobles, and launches a surprise attack. The Battle of Kalakaljid Sands is decisive. Togrul is defeated and killed while fleeing. Sengum escapes but dies in exile. The Kharite Confederation collapses, and Temujin absorbs its people and resources. This victory transforms the balance of power. Temujin is now the dominant force in central Mongolia. But threats remain. The Naimans, a wealthy and sophisticated tribe in the west, see Temujin as a barbarian upstart. Their leader, Tayang Khan, musters an army to crush him. In 1204, the two forces meet at the Battle of Chakarmaut. The Naimans are confident. They have superior numbers and equipment, but Temujin employs a brilliant ruse. He orders each of his soldiers to light multiple campfires at night, creating the illusion of a massive army. The Naimans, seeing the fires stretching across the hills, hesitate. In the morning, Temujin strikes before they can organize. The Naiman army is routed. Tayang Khan is killed. His son Kuchlug flees westward and will become a problem for another day. With the Naimans defeated, Temujin has effectively conquered all of Mongolia. The scattered tribes are united under his rule for the first time in history. In 1206, a great Kurultai is convened near the Onon River. Chiefs and warriors from across the steppe gather. Shamans perform rituals invoking the eternal blue sky, Tengri, the supreme deity of the Mongols. And in a moment that will echo through the centuries, Temujin is proclaimed Genghis Khan, which most scholars believe means universal ruler. Genghis Khan is not merely a new title, it represents a new vision for the Mongols. For centuries they have been divided, weak, prey to the whims of sedentary empires. Now they are one. Genghis does not simply conquer tribes and absorb them. He breaks the old clan system and reorganizes Mongol society from the ground up. He divides his army into units based on the decimal system. Squads of 10, companies of 100, regiments of 1,000, and divisions of 10,000 called tumans. Commanders are chosen for competence, not bloodline. Soldiers from formerly hostile tribes are deliberately mixed together, breaking old loyalties and forging new ones based on the army itself. He establishes a law code, the Yasa. Much of the Yasa is lost to history, but we know it emphasized absolute loyalty, discipline, and meritocracy. Theft within the army is punishable by death. Desertion is unthinkable. But the Yasa also contains surprisingly progressive elements. It forbids the kidnapping of women. It mandates religious tolerance. It protects merchants and envoys. These laws are enforced ruthlessly. No one, not even Genghis's own family members, is above them. Genghis also creates the Keshig, an elite imperial guard of 10,000 men. But the Keshig is more than a bodyguard. It is a training ground for future leaders. Sons of his generals serve in the Keshig, learning discipline, loyalty, and command. It is a meritocratic academy ensuring that the next generation of Mongol leaders will be competent and loyal. With Mongolia unified and organized, Genghis turns his gaze outward. The steppe is too poor to sustain his vast army. His warriors expect rewards, and Genghis knows that empires are built on expansion. The question is not if he will conquer, but where. To the east lies the Jin dynasty, the very empire that once played the Mongols like pawns. To the west lies the Silk Road, the arteries of trade connecting east and west. And beyond that, kingdoms and empires that have never heard of the Mongols. Genghis Khan is 44 years old. He is no longer the starving boy on the banks of the Onan. He is the ruler of a united, disciplined, and hungry nation. And he is about to unleash a storm that will reshape the world. The Jin dynasty is one of the wealthiest and most powerful empires in the world. It controls northern China, a land of ancient cities, fertile plains, and millions of people. The Jin are not Chinese but Yurchen, a semi-nomadic people who conquered northern China a century earlier. They have adopted Chinese customs, built grand palaces, and created a sophisticated bureaucracy. They look upon the Mongols as primitive savages, useful only as mercenaries or buffers against other tribes. In 1211, the Jin emperor sends an envoy to Mongolia, demanding that Genghis Khan submit and pay tribute. The envoy announces that a new Jin emperor has ascended the throne and that Genghis must kowtow, prostrate himself in recognition of Jin supremacy. Genghis Khan listens in silence. Then he spits on the ground, mounts his horse, and rides north. It is an unambiguous declaration. There will be no submission. There will be war. The Jin believe they are invulnerable. Their cities are protected by massive walls, some over 30 feet high. They have hundreds of thousands of soldiers, advanced siege equipment, and the resources of a prosperous empire. The Mongols, by contrast, are nomadic horsemen. They have no experience besieging fortified cities. Conventional wisdom says that cavalry armies cannot conquer walled cities. The Jin expect the Mongols to raid the border, steal some livestock, and retreat. They are catastrophically wrong. Genghis Khan invades in 1211 with an army of perhaps 70,000 men. He does not charge directly at the strongest fortresses. Instead, he employs a strategy of psychological terror combined with ruthless efficiency. His armies sweep across the countryside, destroying villages, massacring resistors, and driving refugees toward the cities. This serves multiple purposes. It deprives the Jin of resources and manpower. It spreads panic, and it overburdens the cities with refugees, straining food supplies and morale. When Genghis encounters a fortified city, he adapts. The Mongols capture Chinese engineers and force them to build siege engines, catapults, trebuchets, siege towers, and battering rams, technology the Mongols never possessed, are now turned against their creators. Genghis offers cities a choice: surrender immediately and be spared, resist and face total annihilation. Most cities resist at first, confident in their walls. This is a mistake. When the Mongols take a city after a siege, they fulfill their promise. The entire population is often slaughtered. Soldiers, civilians, old and young, no one is spared. The few survivors are sent to spread the tale, ensuring that the next city knows what awaits if they resist. This is not mindless cruelty. It is calculated terror. After several cities are annihilated, others begin surrendering without a fight. This saves Mongol lives and speeds the campaign. Genghis has no interest in prolonged sieges. He wants swift submission, and he is willing to commit atrocities to achieve it. The moral calculus is brutal but effective. Kill 100,000 now so that 1,000,000 will surrender later. By 1213, the Mongols have conquered much of northern China. Dozens of cities have fallen. The Jin emperor, desperate, sues for peace. He agrees to pay massive tribute, including gold, silk, horses, and a Jin princess as a bride for Genghis. The Mongols withdraw, laden with plunder. But Genghis knows this is not over. The Jin have been humiliated, but not destroyed. They will rebuild. They will seek revenge. And so, Genghis plans to return. But first, another target emerges: The Western Xia, or Xixia, is a kingdom in northwestern China, a wealthy state enriched by Silk Road trade. The Xixia emperor has pledged to provide troops to support Genghis's campaigns, but fails to deliver. To Genghis, this is treachery. Oaths are sacred. Breaking them is unforgivable. In 1209, and again in 1218, Genghis launches devastating campaigns against the Xixia. City after city falls. The Xixia emperor, terrified, surrenders and promises full submission. Genghis accepts but does not forget. The Xixia are marked. While Genghis consolidates his conquests in the east, an event in the west sets the stage for his most destructive campaign. In 1218, a Mongol trade caravan arrives in the city of Otrar on the border of the Khwarazmian Empire. The Khwarazmian Empire stretches from Persia to Central Asia, a vast and wealthy realm. The governor of Otrar, Inalchuk, accuses the Mongol merchants of being spies. He seizes their goods and executes them. This is not just an insult, it is a catastrophic blunder. Genghis Khan values trade. He understands that merchants enrich his empire. He has granted them protection under his laws. The execution of his merchants is an attack on the Mongol system itself. Genghis sends envoys to the Khwarazmian Shah, Muhammad II, demanding justice. He asks that Inalchuk be handed over for punishment. Shah Muhammad, either misunderstanding the threat or underestimating the Mongols, refuses. Worse, he kills one of Genghis's envoys and humiliates the others by shaving their beards, a profound insult in Mongol culture. Genghis Khan's response is methodical. He spends months preparing. He gathers intelligence on the Khwarazmian Empire. He learns about its cities, its rulers, its weaknesses. He assembles an army of over 100,000 warriors, his largest force yet, and in 1219 he marches west. What follows is one of the most devastating military campaigns in human history. The Khwarazmian Empire is rich but fragmented. Shah Muhammad commands a large army, but his nobles are quarrelsome, his generals incompetent. He makes a fatal strategic error. Instead of concentrating his forces, he spreads them across multiple cities, trying to defend everywhere. This is exactly what Genghis wants. The Mongol army moves with terrifying speed. They split into multiple columns, each targeting different cities simultaneously. The Khwarazmians cannot coordinate a response. City after city falls. Bukhara, one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning, is besieged and captured. Genghis rides into the Grand Mosque and declares that he is the punishment of God sent to chastise the people for their sins. Whether he truly said this or whether it is legend, the message is clear. The Mongols are unstoppable. Resistance is futile. Samarkand, the jewel of the Silk Road, surrenders after a brief siege. The Mongol generals Jebei and Subutai lead a lightning campaign, pursuing Shah Muhammad across Persia. The Shah flees from city to city, his empire collapsing behind him. He dies in 1221, broken and defeated, on an island in the Caspian Sea. His son Jalal al-Din attempts to rally resistance, and for a time he achieves victories. But Genghis hunts him relentlessly. At the Battle of the Indus River, Jalal al-Din is defeated. He plunges his horse into the river and escapes to India, but his power is shattered. The destruction of the Khwarazmian Empire is total. Cities that resist are razed, populations are massacred. The great urban centers of Central Asia, some of the most advanced and prosperous in the world, are reduced to ruins. Scholars estimate that millions die. Irrigation systems that sustained agriculture for centuries are destroyed. Some regions never fully recover. But it is not only violence. Genghis is also a shrewd administrator. Cities that surrender peacefully are spared. Skilled artisans, engineers, and scholars are taken into Mongol service. Genghis recognizes that his empire needs their knowledge. He may be a conqueror, but he is not anti-civilization. He values what civilization produces, wealth, technology, culture, as long as it serves his empire. The campaign against the Khwarazmian Empire also demonstrates the reach of Mongol power. Jebei and Subutai, after pursuing the Shah, continue westward on a reconnaissance mission. They invade the Caucasus, defeat Georgian and Armenian armies, and then swing north into the Russian steppes. In 1223, they encounter a coalition of Russian princes and their Cuman allies at the Battle of the Kalka River. the Mongols annihilate them. Russian chroniclers describe the Mongols as demons, a plague sent by God. Then, as mysteriously as they appeared, the Mongols vanish, riding back east to rejoin Genghis. But they have mapped the lands, they know the routes, and they will return. By 1225, Genghis Khan is in his 60s. He has conquered an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, but he is not finished. The Xia betrayed him years ago, and he has not forgotten. In 1226, despite his age and failing health, Genghis launches a final campaign against the Xia. The kingdom is systematically destroyed. The emperor surrenders, but Genghis orders his execution. In August of 1227, while campaigning in Xia territory, Genghis Khan dies. The exact cause is debated. Some sources say he fell from his horse during a hunt. Others suggest illness or wounds from battle. Mongol tradition speaks of his death with reverence but little detail. What is certain is that his body is taken back to Mongolia in absolute secrecy. According to legend, anyone who encounters the funeral procession is killed to preserve the secret of his burial site. To this day, the location of Genghis Khan's tomb is unknown. Genghis Khan's death could have meant the collapse of the empire. Historically, nomadic empires fall apart when their founder dies. But Genghis planned for this. Before his death, he divided the empire among his 4 sons by boardy. Jochi, the eldest, though dead by this time, has his territories passed to his sons. Chagatai receives Central Asia. Ogadai, Genghis's favorite, is named Great Khan, the supreme ruler. Tolui, the youngest, receives the Mongol heartland. This system, while creating rival power bases, ensures continuity. The empire does not disintegrate, instead it expands. To understand how the Mongols conquered half the known world, we must understand their army. The Mongol military is unlike anything that came before it. It is not simply superior in numbers or bravery. It is a finely tuned instrument of war, combining mobility, discipline, intelligence, and terror into a system that overwhelms every opponent. At the heart of the Mongol war machine is the horse. Mongol horses are small, sturdy, and incredibly resilient. They can survive on sparse grass and endure extreme temperatures. A Mongol warrior does not ride one horse. He brings 4 or 5 on campaign, rotating them to prevent exhaustion. This allows the Mongols to cover over 60 miles a day, an astonishing pace that bewilders their enemies. European and Chinese armies are tied to supply trains and roads. The Mongols carry everything they need or take it from the land. Every Mongol male is a warrior. From childhood, boys are trained to ride, shoot, and fight. By the time they reach adulthood, they are among the finest horsemen in the world. They can shoot arrows accurately while galloping at full speed. They practice shooting forward, backward, and to the sides. This skill is not innate. It is drilled relentlessly. Mongol boys practice on moving targets, on horseback, in all weather conditions. By the time they join the army, archery is instinctive. The Mongol composite bow is a masterpiece of engineering. Made from layers of wood, horn, and sinew, it is compact but incredibly powerful. It has a draw weight of over 100 pounds and can shoot arrows over 300 yards. A Mongol warrior carries 2 bows and 2 quivers, one with light arrows for long range, another with heavy armor-piercing arrows for close combat. They also carry swords, lances, and axes, but the bow is their primary weapon. Discipline is absolute. The Mongol army operates with a level of coordination that astonishes their enemies. This is possible because of the decimal structure. Every soldier knows his place in his unit of 10. Every 10-man unit fits into a 100-man unit, and so on. Orders are transmitted through a clear chain of command. Messengers ride between units, carrying instructions and intelligence. The Mongols also use signal flags, smoke, and even torches at night to communicate across vast distances. Before battle, Mongol commanders conduct thorough reconnaissance. They send scouts ahead to map terrain, identify enemy positions, and locate resources. They interrogate prisoners and deserters. They gather intelligence with a thoroughness that rivals modern military practice. When the Mongols arrive at a battlefield, they know the ground better than their opponents. They choose when and where to fight. If conditions are unfavorable, they withdraw. The Mongols fight only when victory is probable. Their battlefield tactics are devastatingly effective. The most famous is the feigned retreat. Mongol forces engage an enemy, then suddenly turn and flee. The enemy, believing they are winning, breaks formation and pursues. Once the enemy is disorganized and exhausted, the Mongols wheel around and counterattack. Fresh reserves appear from the flanks. The enemy is surrounded and annihilated. This tactic works repeatedly because it exploits human psychology. Soldiers see fleeing enemies and believe victory is at hand. Discipline collapses. By the time they realize the trap, it is too late. The Mongols also master the art of encirclement. They maneuver their forces in a crescent formation, drawing the enemy into the center while wings sweep around the flanks. This requires precise timing and coordination, skills that most armies lack. But the Mongols drill constantly. Their commanders trust their subordinates to execute complex maneuvers without micromanagement. Psychological warfare is central to Mongol strategy. They deliberately spread tales of their own ferocity. They massacre populations of cities that resist, ensuring that the next city hears about it. They spare those who surrender immediately, demonstrating that cooperation is rewarded. This creates a calculation in the minds of their enemies. Resist and die, submit and live. Many choose to submit, sparing the Mongols the cost of prolonged warfare. The Mongols also employ terror in sophisticated ways. They sometimes disguise soldiers with dummies on spare horses, making their army appear larger. They drive captives ahead of their forces as human shields during sieges. They catapult plague-infected corpses over city walls to spread disease. These tactics horrify their enemies and break morale before the battle even begins. But Mongol success is not just about terror. It is also about adaptability. When Genghis Khan first encounters fortified cities, he does not retreat in frustration. He captures engineers and forces them to teach his men siege warfare. Within a few years, the Mongols are as proficient at sieges as any settled army. They adopt gunpowder weapons from the Chinese. They incorporate cavalry tactics from the Turks and administrative systems from the Persians. The Mongols do not cling to tradition. They absorb the best practices of everyone they conquer. Logistics, unglamorous but essential, are another Mongol strength. Every soldier carries provisions. Dried meat, dried milk curds, and millet can sustain a warrior for weeks. If supplies run low, the Mongols hunt or requisition food from conquered territories. They are not tied to a single supply line. This makes them nearly impossible to starve out. European armies of the same period require massive baggage trains. These slow them down and create vulnerabilities. The Mongols have no such weakness. The Mongol Empire also benefits from a sophisticated postal system, the yam. Relay stations are established every 20 to 30 miles across the empire. Messengers ride between stations, changing horses to maintain speed. A message can travel from one end of the empire to the other in a matter of weeks, an astonishing feat for the 13th century. This system allows Genghis and his successors to maintain control over vast distances. Orders are transmitted quickly. Intelligence flows back to the capital. The empire, though enormous, functions as a coherent whole. Religious tolerance is another unexpected element of Mongol success. Genghis Khan is a shamanist, believing in Tengri, the eternal blue sky. But he does not impose this belief on others. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and followers of other faiths are all permitted to practice freely. This is not altruism, it is pragmatism. Religious conflict divides conquered populations. Tolerance keeps them peaceful. Mongol law protects clergy of all religions from taxation and conscription. This earns Genghis goodwill among religious communities who might otherwise resist. Meritocracy also strengthens the Mongol system. In most medieval societies, command positions are reserved for the aristocracy. Competence is secondary to birth. Genghis shatters this. A shepherd's son can become a general if he proves capable. This unleashes talent that other societies suppress. Subutai, arguably the greatest general of the age, is the son of a blacksmith. In a traditional aristocratic system, he would never command armies. Under Genghis, he conquers continents. But this meritocracy has limits. It applies within the military and administrative structure, but ultimate power remains dynastic. Genghis's descendants rule the empire. His sons and grandsons become khans. This creates tensions. Capable generals and administrators exist outside the family, but they can never claim supreme authority. This tension will eventually fracture the empire, but for now it holds. Women in Mongol society occupy a unique position. They have far more autonomy than women in most contemporary societies. They manage households and estates while men are on campaign. They participate in kurultais, the great assemblies. Some Mongol women even lead troops. They are not equal to men, but they are not chattel either. Genghis's wives, particularly Borte, wield significant influence. His daughters are married to loyal vassals, cementing alliances. These women help govern territories and serve as the Khan's eyes and ears. The Mongol legal code, the yasa, is enforced with brutal consistency. Theft is punishable by death. Adultery can be fatal. Lying to a superior is unforgivable. But the yasa also protects the vulnerable. It forbids the kidnapping of women, a common practice in tribal warfare. It mandates care for orphans and widows. It ensures that merchants can travel safely across the empire. This combination of harsh punishment and protective regulation creates a society that is orderly, if not free. The Mongol Empire also fosters trade on an unprecedented scale. The Silk Road, which has existed for centuries, flourishes under Mongol rule. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, makes it possible to travel from Europe to China with relative safety. Merchants carry silk, spices, precious metals, and ideas across thousands of miles. Genghis understands that trade enriches his empire. He protects merchants and establishes standardized weights and measures. This economic integration brings wealth into Mongol coffers and spreads Mongol influence without the need for constant conquest. Yet this system is built on a foundation of conquest. The Mongols are not farmers. They are warriors. The empire requires constant expansion to sustain itself. Warriors expect rewards. Generals demand new campaigns. The Mongol economy is, in many ways, a war economy. Plunder, tribute, and the absorption of conquered territories fuel growth. This creates a relentless momentum. The empire must expand or it will collapse. Genghis Khan understands this. Even in his final years, he plans new campaigns. He eyes Europe, India, and the Middle East. His death does not stop this momentum. His sons and grandsons inherit not just an empire, but an ideology. The Mongols are destined to rule the world. Tengri has ordained it, and so the conquests continue. When Genghis Khan dies in 1227, the question is whether the empire he built will survive. History is littered with empires that collapse when their founder dies. The Macedonian Empire fractured after Alexander. The Hunnic Empire disintegrated after Attila. But the Mongol Empire does not follow this pattern. It grows. Ogedei, Genghis's third son, becomes the Great Khan in 1229. He is not the warrior his father was, but he is a capable administrator and a shrewd diplomat. Ogedei consolidates his father's conquests and expands them. He completes the destruction of the Jin dynasty, which has been clinging to survival in southern Manchuria. By 1234, the Jin are annihilated. Northern China is fully absorbed into the Mongol Empire. Ogedei also turns his attention westward. He sends armies into Eastern Europe under the command of his nephew Batu Khan and the brilliant general Subutai. In 1237, the Mongols invade the Russian principalities. City after city falls. Vladimir, Sustal, Moscow, Kyiv, all are conquered. Russian resistance is brave but futile. The Russian princes cannot unite. They fight the Mongols separately and are defeated separately. By 1240, all of Russia is under Mongol rule. The Russians call this period the Tatar yoke, a time of subjugation and tribute that will last for centuries. But the Mongols do not stop at Russia. In 1241, they invade Poland and Hungary. At the Battle of Legnica, a coalition of Polish and German knights is annihilated. At the Battle of Mohi, the Hungarian army is crushed. Europe is in panic. The Mongols are at the gates of Vienna. They seem unstoppable. Refugees flood westward, carrying tales of invincible horsemen who appear like demons and vanish like ghosts. Kings and popes send desperate letters, trying to organize a defense. But before the Mongols can push further, news arrives from the east. Ogedei Khan has died. According to Mongol law, all princes of the blood must return to Mongolia for the Kurultai to elect a new great Khan. Batu and his generals withdraw from Europe. They never return. Europe, by sheer luck, is spared, but the experience leaves a deep scar. For generations, Europeans will remember the Mongol invasions as a time of apocalyptic terror. The succession after Ogedei's death is turbulent. His widow Torgin rules as regent for 5 years, maneuvering to place her son Guyuk on the throne. Guyuk becomes Great Khan in 1246, but his reign is short. He dies in 1248, possibly poisoned. His death triggers a power struggle between the descendants of Ogedei and the descendants of Genghis's youngest son, Tolui. Tolui's widow, Sorghaghtani Beki, one of the most intelligent and capable women in Mongol history, engineers the election of her son Mongke as Great Khan in 1251. Mongke is a devout Tengris and a disciplined leader. He purges corrupt officials, reforms the administration, and launches new conquests. He sends his brother Hulagu to conquer the Middle East, and he sends his other brother Kublai to complete the conquest of China. The Mongol Empire reaches its zenith under Mongke. It stretches from Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to the Persian Gulf. No empire in history has been larger. Hulagu's campaign in the Middle East is one of the most destructive in history. In 1258, he besieges Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate and one of the greatest cities in the Islamic world. The Caliph, al-Mustasim, believes the Mongols will not dare attack the spiritual center of Islam. He is wrong. When the city falls, Hulagu orders a massacre. Estimates vary, but hundreds of thousands, possibly up to 1 million people, are killed. The House of Wisdom, a legendary library containing centuries of scientific, philosophical, and literary works, is burned. So many books are thrown into the Tigris River that, according to legend, the river runs black with ink. The Abbasid Caliphate, which has existed for over 500 years, ends. The caliph is executed, reportedly rolled in a carpet, and trampled by horses to avoid spilling royal blood. Hulagu continues westward, conquering Syria and threatening Egypt. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, desperate, gathers an army to stop him. In 1260, the two forces meet at the Battle of Ain Jalut in modern-day Israel. For the first time, a Mongol army is decisively defeated. The Mamluks, many of whom are former slaves trained as elite warriors, prove to be a match for the Mongols. Hulagu's forces retreat, and the Mongol advance into the Middle East stops. Why did the Mongols lose at Ain Jalut? Several factors converge. Hulagu had withdrawn most of his forces back to Persia due to political instability in Mongolia. The army at Ain Jalut is smaller than usual. The Mamluks are highly skilled and fight on familiar terrain. And perhaps most importantly, the Mongols are no longer an unknown force. Their tactics are studied. Their weaknesses are identified. Armies have learned to counter the feigned retreat and the encirclement. The Mongols are still formidable, but they are no longer invincible. In 1259, Mongke Khan dies during a campaign in China. His death triggers a civil war. His brothers Kublai and Arik Boke both claim the title of Great Khan. The empire fractures. Kublai eventually wins and establishes his capital in China, founding the Yuan dynasty, but his authority is not universally recognized. The Mongol Empire effectively splits into 4 khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China and Mongolia, the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Middle East, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe. These khanates are nominally united, but in practice they often act independently, sometimes even warring with each other. Kublai Khan, ruling from his magnificent capital Khanbalik, modern-day Beijing, completes the conquest of China. The Song dynasty, which has survived in southern China, falls in 1279. For the first time in history, all of China is ruled by a foreign dynasty. Kublai adopts many Chinese customs. He employs Chinese bureaucrats. He patronizes Chinese art and culture. But he also maintains Mongol identity. Mongols hold the highest military and political offices. Intermarriage between Mongols and Chinese is discouraged. The Yuan dynasty is Mongol, not Chinese, even though it rules China. Kublai's reign is marked by both success and failure. He promotes trade, encourages scholarship, and rebuilds infrastructure damaged by decades of war. The Italian merchant Marco Polo visits his court and is dazzled by its wealth and sophistication. But Kublai's military campaigns outside China are often unsuccessful. His invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281 are disasters. Both times, typhoons destroy much of his fleet. The Japanese call these storms kamikaze, divine winds, and believe the gods have saved them. Kublai's attempts to conquer Vietnam and Java also fail. The era of easy Mongol victories is over. The Ilkhanate in Persia, ruled by Hulagu's descendants, becomes a center of culture and learning. The Ilkhans convert to Islam in the early 14th century, integrating into the societies they rule. They patronize art, architecture, and science. Persian miniature painting flourishes. Observatories are built. Scholars from across the Islamic world gather at Ilkhanate courts. The destruction that Hulagu brought is slowly replaced by a cultural renaissance. The Golden Horde rules Russia and the steppes north of the Black Sea. It is perhaps the most traditionally Mongol of the khanates, maintaining the nomadic lifestyle and military structure. The Russian principalities are vassals, required to pay tribute and provide troops when demanded. The Golden Horde converts to Islam in the early 14th century, creating a Muslim state in Eastern Europe. Trade thrives. The Horde controls key routes between Europe and Asia, enriching itself through tariffs and commerce. The Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia is the most unstable. It is torn between Mongol traditionalists who want to maintain nomadic ways and those who embrace settled urban life. This internal conflict weakens it, and it eventually fragments into smaller states. By the mid-14th century, the Mongol Empire as a unified entity no longer exists. The khanates are independent, but Mongol influence remains. The trade networks established during the Pax Mongolica continue. Ideas, technologies, and diseases flow along these routes. Some historians argue that the Black Death, which devastates Europe and Asia in the 14th century, spreads along Mongol trade routes. The interconnected world that the Mongols create has unintended consequences, both positive and negative. And who was Genghis Khan? What kind of man builds an empire that spans continents and endures for centuries? The historical sources are fragmentary and often contradictory. Mongol chroniclers glorify him. Persian and Chinese chroniclers, writing from conquered peoples, often portray him as a monster. The truth is more complex. Physically, we know little about Genghis Khan's appearance. No contemporary portrait exists. Later depictions vary widely. Some Persian sources describe him as tall, with a long beard and fierce eyes. Chinese sources sometimes describe him differently. Genetic studies suggest he may have had red hair and green eyes, traits that appear in some Mongol populations. But these are speculations. What we do know is that he was robust and physically tough. He survived injuries in battle, the brutal climate of Mongolia, and decades of constant campaigning. His endurance was legendary. Mentally, Genghis was brilliant. He may have been illiterate for much of his life, but he was not uneducated. He learned from everyone he encountered. He adopted the Uyghur script for the Mongol language, recognizing the importance of written communication for administering an empire. He sought out advisors from diverse backgrounds: Mongol shamans, Chinese scholars, Muslim merchants, Christian monks. He listened to their counsel and synthesized it into his own vision. Genghis was also pragmatic to the point of ruthlessness. He valued loyalty above all else. Those who betrayed him were killed without mercy, but those who remained loyal, even former enemies, were rewarded. After defeating the Naimans, he took into his service many of their nobles and warriors. After conquering the Khwarazmian Empire, he employed Persian administrators. He did not hold grudges if someone submitted genuinely, but he never forgave treachery. His personal life was complex. He loved Borte, his first wife, deeply. She was his partner and confidant. He consulted her on important decisions. When she was captured by the Merkits, he risked everything to rescue her. But Genghis also took many other wives and concubines, as was customary for Mongol leaders. These marriages were often political, cementing alliances with conquered or allied tribes. Some sources suggest he had hundreds of wives and concubines, though the exact number is unknown. Genghis's relationship with his sons was fraught. Yochi, his eldest, was always under a cloud of suspicion due to the circumstances of his birth. Genghis never fully trusted him, and Yoshi resented this. Chagatai, his second son, was brave but hot-headed. He and Yogi despised each other. Ogjadai, the third son, was affable and competent, Genghis's favorite. Tolui, the youngest, was a brilliant general but struggled with alcoholism. These family tensions created divisions that would later fracture the empire. Genghis was also superstitious. He consulted shamans before major decisions. He believed that Tengri, the sky god, had ordained his mission to conquer the world. This belief gave him a sense of destiny and justified his actions in his own mind. He was not conquering for personal glory, he was fulfilling a divine mandate. This conviction made him fearless. If Tengri willed his success, then no earthly power could stop him. Yet Genghis was also curious about other belief systems. He met with Taoist monks, Buddhist lamas, and Muslim scholars. He asked them about their teachings and listened carefully. He never converted, but he respected their knowledge. This openness to ideas was unusual for a conqueror. Most invaders imposed their culture on the defeated. Genghis absorbed cultures. One aspect of Genghis's character that stands out is his sense of justice, at least within his own moral framework. The Yasa, his law code, applied to everyone, including himself and his family. He once punished his own son for violating its provisions. This impartiality earned him respect among his followers. They knew that the rules were not arbitrary. Even the great Khan was bound by them. But Genghis's sense of justice did not extend to mercy for enemies. Cities that resisted him were annihilated. Entire populations were slaughtered. Women and children were not spared. This brutality shocks modern sensibilities, but in Genghis's worldview, it was logical. Resistance prolonged wars and cost Mongol lives. By demonstrating the consequences of resistance, he saved lives in the long run, Mongol lives at least. The calculus was cold but consistent. Genghis also valued competence over birth, as we have seen. This meritocracy extended beyond military appointments. He promoted administrators, engineers, and craftsmen based on ability. A skilled blacksmith was worth more to him than an incompetent noble. This utilitarian approach maximized the efficiency of his empire. Despite his conquests, Genghis lived relatively simply. He did not build grand palaces or accumulate vast personal wealth. He continued to live in a gur, the traditional Mongol felt tent, even after conquering empires. He ate simple food, wore practical clothing, and shared hardships with his men. This was partly practical. A nomadic lifestyle suited military campaigns, but it was also symbolic. Genghis remained a Mongol, not a decadent emperor. However, Genghis was not averse to luxury when it served a purpose. He accumulated treasures from conquered lands and distributed them to his followers. He wore fine silk robes on formal occasions. He understood the power of display and used it when necessary. But he did not become enslaved by luxury. Genghis's relationship with religion is fascinating. He was tolerant, but not indifferent. He believed deeply in Tengri and the spiritual power of the shamans. He also believed in omens and prophecy. Before major campaigns, he sought signs from the heavens. He interpreted natural phenomena, storms, eclipses, unusual animal behavior, as messages from the divine. This blend of pragmatism and superstition defined his worldview. One story illustrates Genghis's character. After conquering a city, he was told that a group of Muslim scholars had spoken against him, calling him a tyrant. He summoned them, expecting them to beg for mercy. Instead, they stood firm, repeating their criticisms to his face. Genghis, impressed by their courage, spared them and even took some into his service. He valued honesty and bravery, even in enemies. But there are also stories of his cruelty. After a city's defenders killed one of his favorite generals, Genghis ordered the entire population executed, reportedly over 1 million people. Whether this number is accurate or exaggerated, the intent was clear. Those who harmed his people would face total annihilation. Genghis Khan was a man of contradictions, ruthless yet just, brutal yet tolerant, illiterate yet brilliant, superstitious yet pragmatic. He was shaped by the harsh environment of the Mongolian steppe, where survival demanded strength, cunning, and adaptability. He took those lessons and applied them on a global scale. The result was an empire unlike any before it. As Genghis aged, he became increasingly reflective. He spoke with his sons about governance and legacy. He warned them against greed and complacency. He emphasized the importance of unity. A single arrow, he said, can be easily broken, but bundle arrows together and they become unbreakable. This metaphor encapsulated his vision for the Mongol Empire. As long as his descendants remained united, they would be invincible. If they turned against each other, the empire would collapse. Genghis's final years were spent on campaign against the Xixia. Even in his 60s, he refused to rest. He was driven by a need to complete what he started, to punish those who betrayed him, and perhaps to prove that age had not weakened him. His death in 1227 came not in a palace but in a tent, on campaign, surrounded by his generals and sons. It was a fitting end for a man who lived his entire life in motion, conquering, building, and shaping the world. His body was returned to Mongolia in secrecy. The location of his tomb remains one of history's great mysteries. Some believe it is near the Burkhan Khaldan mountain, a place he considered sacred. Others think it is hidden in a remote valley, guarded by curses and traps. Over the centuries, many have searched for it. None have succeeded. Perhaps that is fitting. Genghis Khan, in death as in life, remains elusive, unknowable, a figure of legend as much as history. We've reached the halfway point of our journey through the life and legacy of Genghis Khan. If you're captivated by this story of conquest, survival, and empire building, make sure you stay with us. We still have much to explore. The true extent of Genghis Khan's influence on the modern world, the myths and realities of Mongol culture, and the lasting legacy that continues to shape our lives today. Stay with us as we uncover the untold story of the Mongol Empire. To understand the Mongol Empire, we must understand the culture that produced it. The Mongols were not simply bloodthirsty barbarians, as many chroniclers portrayed them. They were a people with a rich culture, sophisticated social structures, and a worldview shaped by the harsh realities of steppe life. The Mongolian steppe is one of the most challenging environments on Earth. It is a vast grassland stretching across Mongolia and into Siberia and China. Temperatures range from scorching summers to brutal winters. Water sources are scattered. Predators, wolves, and snow leopards are constant threats. In such an environment, survival requires cooperation, adaptability, and toughness. These qualities define Mongol culture. Mongol society is organized around the tribe and the clan. The tribe is the largest unit, often numbering thousands. Within each tribe are clans, extended families bound by blood and marriage. Leadership is fluid. A Khan, or chieftain, leads by consent of his warriors. If he is weak or incompetent, he can be overthrown. This creates a meritocratic element rare in medieval societies. Power is earned, not simply inherited. The gyar, the traditional Mongol dwelling, is central to their lifestyle. A gyar is a circular tent made of felt stretched over a wooden frame. It is portable, sturdy, and well insulated. A family can disassemble and reassemble a gyar in a few hours. Inside, the layout is traditional. The door always faces south. The hearth is at the center, symbolizing the family's unity. The northern side, opposite the door, is the place of honor where the head of the household sits and where guests are received. Men sit on the west side, women on the east. These customs are observed strictly. Livestock defines Mongol wealth and survival. Horses are the most prized. A Mongol without a horse is not truly Mongol. Horses provide transportation, food, and status. Fermented mare's milk, airog, is a staple drink. It is mildly alcoholic and nutritious. Sheep provide meat, wool, and hides. Goats provide milk and hair. Cattle offer strength for carrying heavy loads. Camels, especially the Bactrian two-humped camels, are essential for desert travel. A family's herd size determines its prosperity. Mongol diet is protein-heavy. They eat mutton, beef, horse meat, and dairy products. Vegetables and grains are rare unless traded or conquered. Dried meat, jerky, can last for months and sustains warriors on campaign. Dairy products, cheese, yogurt, and milk are consumed year-round. The Mongols also eat blood sausages and organ meats, wasting nothing. In times of desperation, they drink horse blood, making a small cut in the animal's vein and sealing it afterward, allowing the horse to survive. This diet, while limited, provides the energy necessary for their demanding lifestyle. Mongol children learn survival skills from infancy. By age 3, they ride horses. By 5, they help herd animals. By 10, they can hunt and fight. Education is practical, not academic. Reading and writing are rare skills, reserved for scribes and administrators. But Mongols are trained in observation, tracking, navigation by stars, and survival in extreme conditions. These skills make them formidable in any environment. Women in Mongol society have more autonomy than in many contemporary cultures. They manage households, own property, and participate in economic decisions. When men go to war, women run the camps and herds. They are not warriors typically, but some exceptions exist. Mongol women are skilled riders and can defend themselves if necessary. They participate in feasts and councils. While men hold formal power, women wield significant influence, particularly within families. Marriage is a transaction that forges alliances. Betrothals are arranged young, sometimes in childhood. A bride price is paid by the groom's family to the bride's family. This is not a purchase, but a compensation for losing a family member and worker. Marriages are celebrated with feasts, music, and competitions. Polygamy is common among wealthy Mongols. A man's first wife holds the highest status, but additional wives increase his household's labor force and political connections. Mongol religion, Tengrism, revolves around the worship of Tengri, the eternal blue sky. Tengri is both the sky itself and the supreme deity. He is distant and powerful, concerned with the order of the universe. Beneath Tengri are countless spirits associated with natural features: mountains, rivers, forests, and animals. Shamans, spiritual leaders who can communicate with these spirits, perform rituals to ensure prosperity and victory. They enter trances, chant, and use drums to journey to the spirit world. Shamans are respected and feared. Angering a shaman can bring curses. The Mongols also practice ancestor worship. Dead relatives are believed to watch over the living. Offerings of food and drink are made at family shrines. Respect for ancestors is paramount. Disrespecting the dead brings misfortune. Funerals are elaborate. The deceased is buried with possessions they will need in the afterlife: weapons, tools, and even horses. Important leaders are buried in secret to prevent grave robbing and desecration. Mongol festivals mark the cycles of nature and the herd. The Nadam festival, still celebrated today, features wrestling, horse racing, and archery competitions. These are not mere games. They are training for war. Young men prove their strength and skill. Winners gain status and attract the attention of leaders looking for warriors. Feasts accompany festivals, with whole animals roasted and vast quantities of arrow consumed. Music, played on horsehead fiddles and sung in deep, throaty tones, accompanies dancing and storytelling. Storytelling is central to Mongol culture. Elders recite epic poems about heroes, battles, and the origins of clans. These oral traditions preserve history and teach values: bravery, loyalty, cunning, and endurance. Children grow up hearing tales of ancestors who survived impossible odds, who outwitted enemies, who sacrificed for the tribe. These stories shape Mongol identity and instill pride. Hospitality is sacred. A traveler arriving at a gur is always offered food and shelter, even if the host is poor. To refuse hospitality or to harm a guest is a grievous sin. This tradition makes travel across the steppe possible. Even enemies, if they seek refuge, must be treated well until they leave. This code of hospitality later extends to the Mongol Empire's treatment of merchants and envoys, ensuring safe passage across vast distances. Honor and reputation are everything. A Mongol's word is his bond. Oaths sworn before witnesses in the sky are unbreakable. To lie or betray an oath is to lose one's honor, and without honor, a Mongol is nothing. This cultural emphasis on oath-keeping makes the Mongol army reliable. Orders are followed, agreements are honored. Discipline is maintained not just through fear, but through a shared sense of duty and honor. Warfare is not seen as evil, but as a natural part of life. The steppe is a harsh place where resources are limited. Conflict over grazing land, water, and livestock is inevitable. Raiding enemy tribes is a way to acquire wealth and prove manhood. Young men gain status through bravery in battle. Cowardice is shameful and can result in exile or death. This warrior culture produces generations of men who are fearless, disciplined, and utterly committed to their comrades. Music and art, while less documented, are also important. Mongol throat singing, a technique where singers produce multiple pitches simultaneously, is hauntingly beautiful. It mimics the sounds of nature, wind, animals, rivers. The horsehead fiddle, or morin khor, is the national instrument. Its music is melancholic and evocative, reflecting the vast, lonely landscapes of the steppe. Visual art is primarily functional, decorated saddles, jewelry, and clothing. But these items are crafted with care and skill, reflecting pride in one's possessions. The Mongol relationship with nature is one of respect and pragmatism. They do not see themselves as separate from nature, but as part of it. The land, the sky, the animals are all connected. Rituals are performed to maintain balance. Overhunting or overgrazing is avoided when possible, not out of modern environmentalism, but because it threatens survival. The Mongols live lightly on the land, leaving little permanent mark. When they move, the grassland recovers. This sustainability is born of necessity, not philosophy, but it works. Genghis Khan's genius was to take this culture and scale it. The values that worked for a tribe of a few hundred, loyalty, discipline, meritocracy, he applied to an empire of millions. The mobility that allowed Mongols to follow herds across the steppe became the mobility that allowed armies to conquer continents. The adaptability that let Mongols survive in deserts, mountains, and frozen tundra became the adaptability that let them master siege warfare, naval battles, and governance of diverse peoples. But the Mongol way of life also had limitations. It was fundamentally nomadic. Mongols did not build cities or develop complex agriculture. When they conquered settled civilizations, they struggled to govern them. They relied on local administrators and adopted local systems, often diluting their own culture in the process. Over generations, Mongol rulers in China became Chinese. Mongol rulers in Persia became Persian. The steppe culture that produced Genghis Khan could conquer the world, but it could not fully integrate with it without changing. Yet the core values persisted: loyalty, discipline, merit, pragmatism. These values, instilled on the harsh steppes of Mongolia, became the foundation of the largest contiguous empire in history, and they continue to define Mongolian identity today. Modern Mongolians still celebrate Nadam, still live in gurs in rural areas, still practice nomadic herding. The culture that produced Genghis Khan endures, a testament to its resilience and strength. The figure of Genghis Khan is shrouded in myth. Over the centuries, countless legends have grown around him, some celebrating him as a hero, others demonizing him as a monster. Separating fact from fiction is challenging, but it is essential if we are to understand the true man and his legacy. One of the most persistent legends is that Genghis Khan is the ancestor of millions. Genetic studies have shown that a Y chromosome lineage found in roughly 16 million men across Asia traces back to a common ancestor who lived around the time of Genghis Khan. This has led to speculation that Genghis himself is this ancestor. While possible, it is not certain. The lineage could also belong to one of his close male relatives. What is clear is that Genghis and his descendants had many offspring, spreading their genetic legacy across a vast empire. Another myth is that the Mongols were invincible. While they won most of their battles, they were not unbeatable. They lost at Ain Jalut, as we have seen. They failed to conquer Japan, Vietnam, and Java. They suffered defeats in India and were eventually expelled from the Middle East by the Mamluks. The Mongols were extraordinarily effective, but they were human, subject to the same limitations as any army: logistics, disease, weather, and the resilience of their enemies. The death toll attributed to the Mongol conquest is often exaggerated. Estimates range from 10 million to 40 million deaths, sometimes even higher. These numbers are derived from chroniclers who had every reason to inflate them, either to glorify the Mongols' power or to emphasize the suffering of the conquered. Modern historians are skeptical of the highest estimates. While the Mongols certainly killed millions, the exact number is unknowable. What is certain is that their campaigns caused massive depopulation in some regions, particularly in Central Asia and Persia, where cities were destroyed and agricultural infrastructure collapsed. There is also a myth that the Mongols destroyed all culture they encountered. This is false. While the Mongols were brutal in war, they were patrons of culture in peace. They protected artisans, scholars, and religious figures. They commissioned works of art and architecture. The Ilkhanate in Persia became a center of Islamic culture. The Yuan dynasty in China preserved and even expanded Chinese cultural traditions. The Mongols absorbed and spread culture rather than simply destroying it. One of the most enduring images of Genghis Khan is as a destroyer of cities. This is partly true. Cities that resisted were often razed, but cities that surrendered were spared and sometimes prospered. The Mongols understood that cities were economically valuable. Destroying them indiscriminately would have been counterproductive. The massacres were strategic, designed to terrorize future opponents into submission. They were not acts of mindless savagery. The legend that Genghis Khan had hundreds or even thousands of children is also likely exaggerated. While he certainly had multiple wives and concubines, the administrative and logistical demands of running an empire left little time for a harem lifestyle. His most important descendants came from a relatively small number of women, primarily Borte and a few other principal wives. The genetic legacy attributed to him may be more accurately attributed to his sons and grandsons, who ruled over vast territories and had ample opportunity to father many children. There is a romantic myth that Genghis Khan was a noble savage, unspoiled by civilization, who conquered through sheer force of will and honor. This ignores the complexity of the man. Genghis was ruthless, pragmatic, and willing to commit atrocities to achieve his goals. He was also intelligent, curious, and capable of mercy when it served his interests. He was neither a hero nor a villain, but a historical figure whose actions must be understood in context. Another legend is that the Mongols invented gunpowder. They did not. Gunpowder was invented in China centuries before Genghis. However, the Mongols were among the first to use gunpowder weapons extensively in warfare. They learned from Chinese engineers and deployed bombs, fire arrows, and early cannons in their sieges. They spread this technology westward, influencing European and Middle Eastern military development. The idea that the Mongols were uncivilized barbarians is a persistent myth rooted in the prejudices of sedentary societies. To Chinese, Persian, and European chroniclers, nomads were inherently inferior. They lacked cities, written culture, and the trappings of what these societies considered civilization. But the Mongols had their own sophisticated culture, as we have seen. Their legal system, military organization, and administrative innovations were advanced for their time. They were different, not inferior. One particularly dark legend is that the Mongols poisoned wells and spread plague deliberately. There are accounts of Mongol armies catapulting plague-infected corpses over city walls during sieges, particularly in the Crimea. Whether this was a deliberate attempt at biological warfare or simply a disposal of bodies is debated. The Black Death, which swept through Asia and Europe in the 14th century, likely spread along Mongol trade routes, but there is no evidence that the Mongols intentionally caused the pandemic. They were victims of it as much as anyone. The mystery of Genghis Khan's tomb has spawned countless legends. Some say it is guarded by curses and traps. Others claim that a river was diverted over it to hide the location. There are tales of entire forests planted to conceal the site. Legends say that anyone who finds the tomb will unleash disaster. These stories have deterred many would-be treasure hunters. Modern archaeology has attempted to locate the tomb using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, but so far nothing conclusive has been found. The tomb remains hidden, perhaps deliberately, perhaps simply lost to time. There is also a legend that Genghis Khan was a religious prophet or messianic figure. Some later Mongol chroniclers portrayed him as divinely chosen to unite the world. While Genghis certainly believed that Tengri ordained his mission, he did not claim to be a prophet or a god. He was a leader, a conqueror, a lawgiver, but not a religious figure in the sense of founding a new faith. One of the most surprising truths about Genghis Khan is his emphasis on meritocracy and religious tolerance. These are often downplayed in popular narratives that focus on his brutality, but the Yasa protected religious freedom. Mongol law exempted clergy from taxes. Genghis employed advisors from multiple faiths. This tolerance was not ideological, but pragmatic. Religious conflict destabilized conquered territories. Tolerance kept them peaceful, but it was tolerance nonetheless, and it was remarkable for the 13th century. The myth that Mongol women were oppressed is also misleading. While Mongol society was patriarchal, women had rights and agency. They could own property, manage estates, and influence political decisions. Some Mongol queens and princesses wielded significant power. Sorghaghtani Beki, Tolui's widow, was one of the most influential figures in the empire, engineering the rise of her sons to power. The idea that all pre-modern societies treated women identically is a simplification. Finally, there is the legend of Genghis Khan as an environmental destroyer. Some modern narratives claim that the Mongol conquest caused mass depopulation, which allowed forests to regrow and may have contributed to a medieval cooling period by absorbing carbon dioxide. While the Mongol conquest did cause depopulation in some regions, the environmental impact is difficult to quantify. The Mongols themselves were relatively light on the land, practicing sustainable nomadic herding. The environmental changes were likely more a consequence of agricultural collapse in war-torn regions than deliberate policy. Genghis Khan, the man, is almost impossible to fully recover. The sources are too fragmentary, too biased, too far removed from events. What we have is a figure of immense historical importance whose life has been mythologized beyond recognition. But beneath the myths, there are traces of the real man, a survivor, a strategist, a builder, a conqueror. He was brutal, yes, but also brilliant. He was ruthless, but also capable of mercy. He was a product of his time and place, shaped by the harsh realities of the Mongolian steppe, and he changed the world. The Mongol Empire eventually fragmented and declined, but its impact on world history is immeasurable. The Mongols connected East and West in ways that had never been possible before. They facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, technologies, and even diseases. The world that emerged from the Mongol conquest was fundamentally different from the world that existed before them. One of the most significant legacies is the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. For roughly a century, from the mid-13th to the mid-14th century, the Mongol Empire made long-distance trade safer and more profitable than ever before. Merchants could travel from Europe to China with relative security, protected by Mongol law and infrastructure. The Silk Road flourished. Goods flowed in unprecedented volumes. Chinese silk reached European markets. Persian carpets traveled east. Spices, precious metals, and luxury goods moved across continents. But it was not only goods that traveled. Ideas moved along these routes as well. Chinese technologies, including gunpowder, printing, and the compass, spread westward. Islamic science and mathematics influenced European scholars. Artistic styles blended. Persian miniatures incorporated Chinese techniques. Chinese ceramics were influenced by Islamic designs. This cultural exchange enriched all the civilizations involved. The Mongol Empire also facilitated the movement of people. Artisans, scholars, soldiers, and administrators were relocated across vast distances. Chinese engineers built siege engines in Persia. Persian astronomers advised Mongol Khans in China. This forced migration, while often brutal, created multicultural courts and cities where knowledge was shared and innovation flourished. The postal system, the yam, was one of the Mongol Empire's most important innovations. It consisted of relay stations where messengers could change horses and rest. Messages and orders could travel across the empire in weeks rather than months. This system inspired later postal systems in Europe and Asia. The concept of a reliable state-run communication network owes much to the Mongols. The legal innovations of Genghis Khan also had lasting impact. The Yasa emphasized meritocracy, discipline, and the rule of law. While it was harsh, it was also consistent. Everyone, from the lowliest soldier to the great Khan, was theoretically subject to it. This idea that law applies equally to all influenced later legal traditions. Some scholars argue that European Enlightenment thinkers, who admired reports of Mongol meritocracy and religious tolerance, were influenced by Mongol examples, though this is debated. Religious tolerance practiced by the Mongols out of pragmatism had profound effects. In the Mongol Empire, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and others coexisted. This was rare in medieval times, when religious wars were common. The Mongol example demonstrated that diverse populations could be governed without imposing a single faith. This may have influenced later ideas about religious pluralism, though again, direct connections are difficult to prove. The Mongol conquest also had devastating consequences. The destruction of Baghdad in 1258 ended the Islamic Golden Age. The city, once a beacon of learning and culture, never fully recovered. The library of the House of Wisdom, containing centuries of accumulated knowledge, was lost. Scholars were killed. The intellectual vibrancy of the Islamic world diminished. Some historians argue that the Middle East never fully recovered from the Mongol invasions, though this is contested. Similarly, the Mongol invasions of Russia had long-term effects. The Russian principalities were subjugated for over 2 centuries under the Golden Horde. This period, known as the Tatar Yoke, shaped Russian political and cultural development. Some historians argue that Russian autocracy and centralization were influenced by Mongol rule. The Mongols demanded tribute and obedience, but otherwise allowed local rulers to govern. This model may have influenced the later Russian Empire's approach to governing diverse territories. In China, the Yuan dynasty, founded by Kublai Khan, ruled for less than a century. It was eventually overthrown by the Ming dynasty in 1368. The Ming emperors portrayed the Mongols as foreign invaders and worked to erase their influence. Yet the Yuan period left lasting marks. The capital, Khanbalik, became Beijing, which remains China's capital today. The Mongol emphasis on trade and infrastructure benefited China, even if Chinese scholars were reluctant to admit it. The integration of diverse ethnic groups under Mongol rule also influenced China's later multi-ethnic empire. In Persia, the Khanate collapsed in the 14th century, fragmenting into smaller states. But the cultural flowering it sponsored continued. Persian art, literature, and architecture reached new heights in the post-Mongol period. The Mongol period is remembered in Persian historiography as a time of destruction followed by Renaissance. The Black Death, which devastated Europe and Asia in the 14th century, is often linked to the Mongol Empire. The disease likely spread along the trade routes that the Mongols maintained. Increased connectivity, while economically beneficial, also facilitated the spread of plague. The pandemic killed tens of millions and fundamentally altered European society. It weakened feudalism, redistributed wealth, and contributed to the eventual rise of the Renaissance. In this indirect way, the Mongol Empire influenced the course of European history. The Mongol military legacy is also significant. European and Middle Eastern armies studied Mongol tactics and tried to emulate them. The use of light cavalry, feigned retreats, and rapid maneuvers influenced later military thinking. The Mongols demonstrated that mobility and intelligence could defeat larger, better-equipped forces. This lesson was not lost on future generals. The political legacy is more ambiguous. The Mongol Empire did not establish a lasting political system. The khanates eventually fragmented and were conquered or absorbed by other powers. But the idea of a universal empire, a single ruler uniting diverse peoples, persisted. Later empire builders, from Timur to the Ottomans to the Russians, drew inspiration, directly or indirectly, from the Mongol model. In Mongolia itself, the collapse of the empire led to a return to tribal divisions. For centuries, Mongolia was weak and divided, dominated by the Qing dynasty of China. It was not until the 20th century that Mongolia regained independence. Today, Genghis Khan is a national hero, a symbol of Mongolian pride and identity. His face appears on currency, monuments, and even vodka bottles. In Mongolia, he is not remembered as a conqueror, but as a unifier, the founder of the nation. Globally, perceptions of Genghis Khan vary. In the West, he is often portrayed as a barbarian, a symbol of destruction. In Asia, views are more mixed. In China, he is a controversial figure, both a conqueror and a ruler of China. In Central Asia, he is remembered with a mix of fear and respect. In Mongolia, he is revered. Genghis Khan's legacy is not easily summarized. He was responsible for millions of deaths and immense suffering, but he also facilitated unprecedented cultural and economic exchange. He destroyed empires, but also built one that connected the world. He was a product of his brutal age, but he also transcended it, creating systems and ideas that outlasted him. In the end, Genghis Khan is a mirror. What we see in him reflects our own values and preoccupations. To some, he is a monster. To others, a genius. To still others, a complex figure who defies simple categorization. All of these perspectives contain truth. Genghis Khan was all of these things and more. He was human, flawed, brilliant, and terrifying, and his impact on history is undeniable. Centuries after the Mongol Empire's decline, Genghis Khan and his legacy continue to fascinate and provoke. The way we remember the Mongols says as much about us as it does about them. In the modern world, Genghis Khan has been reimagined countless times, each reimagining reflecting contemporary concerns and values. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Western historians and writers portrayed Genghis Khan as the quintessential barbarian. This was the age of European imperialism, when Western powers were conquering much of the world and justifying it with narratives of bringing civilization to savages. In this context, the Mongols were useful as a counterexample. They were the uncivilized horde, the destructive force that had to be resisted and ultimately was defeated by superior, civilized societies. This narrative was self-serving and deeply racist, but it dominated Western historiography for decades. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union, which controlled Mongolia, promoted a different image. Genghis Khan was downplayed or even suppressed. The Soviets preferred to emphasize class struggle and proletarian revolution, not the feudal conquests of a nomadic warlord. Mongolian intellectuals were discouraged from celebrating their pre-Soviet past. Genghis Khan became a taboo subject, his memory erased from public life. But with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Mongolia gained independence and freedom to reclaim its history. Genghis Khan was rehabilitated almost overnight. He became the symbol of Mongolian nationalism. Statues, museums, and monuments were erected in his honor. His face appeared everywhere. For Mongolians, Genghis represented strength, independence, and a glorious past that they could be proud of after decades of Soviet control. This resurgence was not just nostalgic, it was political, a reassertion of Mongolian identity distinct from both Russia and China. In popular culture, Genghis Khan has been portrayed in countless films, novels, and video games. These depictions range from the ridiculous to the respectful. Hollywood films often present him as a brutal conqueror, emphasizing violence and spectacle. Some portrayals are more nuanced, exploring his intelligence and complexity, but even the most sympathetic portrayals struggle with the fundamental tension. How do you make a hero out of a man responsible for millions of deaths? Video games, particularly strategy games, often feature Genghis Khan as a playable character or faction. Players command Mongol armies, reenacting his conquests. These games emphasize his military genius and the unique capabilities of Mongol cavalry. For many young people, their first exposure to Genghis Khan comes through these games. This gamification of history is controversial. Does it trivialize the suffering caused by the Mongol conquests? Or does it spark interest in history that leads to deeper learning? The answer is probably both. In academic circles, views of Genghis Khan have evolved. Earlier historians focused on his destructiveness. More recent scholarship emphasizes his role as a facilitator of cultural exchange and globalization. Some historians argue that the Mongol Empire was a crucial step in the development of the modern world, connecting previously isolated civilizations and enabling the flow of ideas and technologies that would eventually lead to the Renaissance, the age of exploration, and the modern global economy. This view is sometimes called Mongol exceptionalism, and it has its critics, who argue that it downplays the suffering caused by the conquest. There is also a feminist critique of Genghis Khan narratives. Most accounts focus on male warriors and rulers, ignoring or minimizing the experiences of women. Yet women played crucial roles in the Mongol Empire. They managed estates, negotiated alliances, and in some cases, ruled as regents. Some scholars argue that a more complete understanding of the Mongol Empire requires centering women's experiences and contributions. Environmentalists have also weighed in. Some argue that the Mongol conquests, by causing massive depopulation, allowed forests to regrow and may have contributed to a global cooling period. This has led to the provocative claim that Genghis Khan was an early environmentalist. This is almost certainly overstated. Any environmental benefits were unintentional byproducts of violence, not conscious policy. but the claim highlights how modern concerns can be projected onto historical figures. In China, Genghis Khan is a complicated figure. He conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty, making him part of Chinese history. Yet he was also a foreign invader who destroyed Chinese armies and cities. The Chinese government today promotes a narrative of a unified, multi-ethnic China that includes the Mongols as one of the nation's 56 ethnic groups. In this narrative, Genghis Khan is both a conqueror and a Chinese emperor. This interpretation is politically motivated, designed to legitimize Chinese control over Inner Mongolia and other regions with Mongol populations. In the Middle East, Genghis Khan and his grandson Hulagu are remembered primarily for their destruction. The sack of Baghdad remains a traumatic memory in Islamic history. Some modern Islamist thinkers have even compared Western interventions in the Middle East to the Mongol invasions, using the term Mongol as a metaphor for external destructive forces. This shows how historical memory can be weaponized for contemporary political purposes. In Russia, the Mongol period is remembered as a time of subjugation, the Tatar yoke. Russian nationalist narratives emphasize resistance against Mongol rule and the eventual liberation. The Mongols are portrayed as oppressors whose influence was ultimately overcome. However, some historians argue that Mongol rule shaped Russian state formation, contributing to the centralized autocracy that characterized later Russian empires. This is a contentious view, as it challenges the narrative of Russian exceptionalism. In the West, there is a growing fascination with Genghis Khan as a leadership figure. Business books and self-help gurus sometimes invoke Genghis as an example of effective management. They emphasize his meritocracy, his delegation of authority, and his strategic thinking. This sanitized version of Genghis Khan strips away the violence and presents him as a case study in organizational success. Critics argue that this is deeply inappropriate, turning a mass murderer into a corporate role model, but it reflects a broader tendency to extract lessons from history without fully grappling with its moral complexities. There is also a genetic legacy that fascinates people. The idea that millions of men alive today may be descended from Genghis Khan has captured the public imagination. It is often cited as evidence of his virility and power, but it also raises uncomfortable questions about consent and violence. Many of these descendants likely result from the rape and coercion of conquered women, a reality that is often glossed over in popular accounts. Artists have also been drawn to Genghis Khan. Poets, novelists, and filmmakers have used him as a symbol of power, ambition, and the darker aspects of human nature. He appears in epic poems, historical novels, and even operas. These artistic interpretations vary widely, reflecting the artist's own cultural context and concerns. Some portray him sympathetically as a man shaped by circumstance who built something extraordinary. Others depict him as a villain, a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition. In recent years, there has been a push for more balanced and nuanced portrayals. Scholars emphasize the importance of understanding Genghis Khan in his historical context, not judging him by modern moral standards. This does not mean excusing his actions, but rather seeking to understand them. Why did the Mongols conquer? What motivated Genghis? How did he see himself and his mission? These questions lead to a more complex and ultimately more truthful picture. The debate over Genghis Khan's legacy is unlikely to be resolved. He is too large a figure, too embedded in the historical trajectories of multiple civilizations. Different cultures will continue to remember him differently, and that is perhaps as it should be. History is not a single narrative, but a tapestry of perspectives. Genghis Khan is a thread that runs through many of them, connecting stories of conquest and resistance, destruction and creation, terror and fascination. What is clear is that Genghis Khan cannot be ignored. He shaped the world in profound ways. The boundaries of nations, the routes of trade, the mixing of cultures, all bear his mark. To study world history is to encounter Genghis Khan, and to encounter him is to confront fundamental questions about power, violence, leadership, and human nature. These questions remain relevant today, which is why Genghis Khan continues to command our attention more than 8 centuries after his death. What can we learn from Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire? This question has occupied historians, military strategists, and leaders for centuries. While we cannot and should not emulate Genghis's brutality, there are insights from his life and legacy that remain relevant. First, the power of unity. Genghis's greatest achievement was uniting the fractious Mongol tribes. For centuries, they had fought each other, weakening themselves and making them vulnerable to external enemies. Genghis forged them into a single nation with a common purpose. This unity multiplied their strength. The lesson is clear. Divided groups, whether tribes, organizations, or nations, are weak. United, they can achieve far more than the sum of their parts. Second, meritocracy matters. Genghis promoted based on ability, not birth. This unleashed talent that traditional aristocratic systems suppressed. In modern terms, this means that organizations and societies that reward competence over connections or pedigree are more likely to succeed. Talent exists at all levels of society. Systems that fail to identify and nurture it waste human potential. Third, adaptability is crucial. The Mongols did not cling to tradition when it hindered them. They adopted siege warfare from the Chinese, administrative systems from the Persians, and technologies from wherever they found them. They were ruthlessly pragmatic, taking what worked and discarding what did not. In a rapidly changing world, this lesson is more relevant than ever. Those who adapt survive. Those who resist change are swept away. Fourth, logistics win wars. The Mongols understood that armies move on their stomachs. They planned meticulously, ensuring their forces were supplied and mobile. Modern militaries and businesses understand this. Success requires not just strategy but execution, and execution depends on logistics. The best plan in the world fails if resources do not reach the right place at the right time. Fifth, intelligence is power. Genghis invested heavily in reconnaissance and espionage. Before attacking, he knew his enemy's strengths, weaknesses, and internal divisions. Information gave him a decisive advantage. In the modern world, data and intelligence are similarly crucial. Whether in business, politics, or military affairs, those who have better information make better decisions. Sixth, psychological warfare is effective. The Mongols terrified their enemies with tales of their ferocity. This reduced resistance and saved Mongol lives. Modern conflicts, both military and otherwise, involve information warfare, propaganda, and the manipulation of perceptions. Understanding how fear and morale affect behavior is a key element of strategy. Seventh, tolerance can be strategic. Genghis allowed religious and cultural diversity within his empire. This reduced conflict and made governing easier. In multicultural societies today, tolerance is not just a moral imperative, but a practical necessity. Societies that embrace diversity and allow different groups to coexist peacefully are more stable and prosperous than those torn by sectarian conflict. Eighth, law and order are foundational. The Yasa, harsh as it was, created predictability. People knew the rules and the consequences of breaking them. This stability allowed the empire to function. Modern societies, too, depend on the rule of law. When laws are applied consistently and fairly, trust in institutions grows. When they are arbitrary or selectively enforced, societies fracture. Ninth, communication networks are vital. The Yam postal system kept the vast empire connected. Orders reached distant provinces. Intelligence flowed back to the center. In our digital age, communication is even faster, but the principle remains. Organizations and societies need reliable systems for transmitting information. Without them, coordination collapses. 10th, leadership requires both vision and ruthlessness. Genghis had a grand vision: unite the Mongols and conquer the world. He pursued this vision with unwavering determination. He made hard decisions, eliminated threats, and sacrificed short-term comfort for long-term goals. Modern leaders, whether in politics, business, or other fields, face similar choices. Vision without execution is fantasy. Execution without vision is aimless. Genghis combined both. But there are also cautionary lessons. The Mongol Empire's reliance on conquest was unsustainable. Once expansion stopped, the system began to fracture. Modern economies and political systems that depend on perpetual growth face similar risks. Sustainability, not just expansion, must be part of the plan. The Mongol approach to warfare, while effective, was horrifically brutal. The massacres, the terror, the destruction. These tactics worked in the 13th century, but are morally indefensible and practically counterproductive in the modern world. International law, human rights, and global norms have evolved. What Genghis did cannot and should not be replicated. The suppression of individuality in favor of collective discipline, while effective militarily, is problematic. Modern societies value individual rights and freedoms. A system that demands absolute obedience, as the Mongol military did, is incompatible with democratic values. There is a balance to be struck between collective purpose and individual liberty. The Mongol Empire also demonstrates the fragility of empires. Despite its size and power, it lasted only a few generations before fragmenting. Internal divisions, succession crises, and the difficulty of governing diverse populations eventually tore it apart. Modern superpowers and multinational organizations face similar challenges. Power is difficult to acquire and even more difficult to maintain. Another lesson is the unintended consequences of connectivity. The Mongol Empire connected the world, facilitating trade and cultural exchange. But it also spread the Black Death, killing tens of millions. Today, globalization brings similar trade-offs. Interconnectedness creates prosperity and innovation, but also spreads risks, diseases, financial crises, and environmental problems. Managing these risks is one of the great challenges of our time. Finally, there is the question of legacy. Genghis Khan built an empire that changed the world, but at immense human cost. Was it worth it? That is a question each person must answer for themselves. What is undeniable is that Genghis had an impact. He mattered. His choices shaped the trajectory of civilizations. This raises the question for all of us. What legacy will we leave? Will our actions matter? Will we build something that endures, even if imperfectly, or will we be forgotten? Genghis Khan's life is a reminder that individuals can shape history. Circumstances matter, but so do choices. Genghis was born into poverty and obscurity. He could have died unknown, another casualty of steppe warfare, but he chose a different path. He survived, adapted, learned, and ultimately conquered. His story is empowering and terrifying in equal measure. It shows what human ambition and will can achieve, for better and worse. Throughout this documentary, we have explored the life of Genghis Khan, the rise of the Mongol Empire, and its profound impact on world history. But there are aspects of this story that remain untold, hidden in the gaps of historical records, lost to time, or deliberately obscured. One untold story is that of the countless individuals whose lives were shattered by the Mongol conquest. History remembers Genghis and his generals, but what about the farmer whose village was burned? The artisan whose city was sacked? The mother who watched her children killed? These voices are almost entirely absent from the historical record. They are statistics, numbers, and estimates of casualties. But each was a person with hopes, fears, and dreams. Their stories are lost, but they deserve to be remembered. Another untold story is that of the women who shaped the Mongol Empire. We know about Borte, Genghis's first wife, and a few other prominent women. But what about the thousands of women who managed households, raised children, and kept the Mongol economy functioning while men were on campaign? What about the women who were captured, enslaved, or married into Mongol families? Their experiences, their resilience, and their suffering are largely invisible in the historical sources. There is also the story of dissent within the Mongol Empire. Not everyone agreed with Genghis or his policies. There were those who resisted, who spoke out, who tried to preserve their own cultures and autonomy. These voices were suppressed, but they existed. The narrative of Mongol inevitability, that resistance was futile, obscures the reality that many fought back, even if they ultimately lost. The environmental story is also largely untold. What was the ecological impact of the Mongol conquest? We know that cities were destroyed and agricultural systems collapsed. But what happened to the land itself? How did the depopulation affect ecosystems? Did wildlife recover? Did forests expand? These are questions that historians and ecologists are only beginning to explore. There is also the story of the ordinary Mongol soldier. We know about the great generals, Subutai, Jebe, Makali. But what about the common warrior who rode thousands of miles, endured hardship, fought in countless battles, and perhaps died far from home. What did they think about the campaigns? Did they believe in Genghis's vision, or were they just following orders? Did they feel pride in their conquests, or did they long for the steppes and their families? Another untold story is that of cultural synthesis. The Mongol Empire brought together people from vastly different backgrounds. What happened when a Chinese engineer worked alongside a Persian astronomer? When a Buddhist monk debated a Christian priest in a Mongol court? These interactions must have been fascinating, but they are poorly documented. The cultural hybridity that the Mongol Empire fostered is only now being fully appreciated. There is also the story of the Mongols who did not conquer. Not every Mongol tribe joined Genghis. Some remained independent or were conquered later. What happened to them? How did they view their more successful cousins? This perspective is almost entirely absent from the sources, which focus on the winners. The story of Genghis Khan's own internal struggles is also largely untold. We know the public Genghis, the conqueror and lawgiver. But what about the private man? Did he have doubts? Did he grieve for the enemies he killed? Did he feel guilt? The sources portray him as supremely confident, but that is likely propaganda. All humans doubt. Did Genghis? We will never know. Another untold story is that of the succession conflicts that plagued the empire after Genghis's death. The official histories gloss over the violence and intrigue, but these were brutal struggles. Brothers, cousins, and uncles vied for power. Armies clashed. Assassinations occurred. The Mongol Empire was held together as much by force and fear as by loyalty. This darker side of succession is often minimized. There is also the story of the Mongols in decline. After the empire fragmented, what happened to the descendants of the great conquerors? Some became rulers in their own right, but others faded into obscurity. The Mongol identity was diluted as they assimilated into the cultures they conquered. In China, Mongols became Chinese. In Persia, they became Persian. In Russia, they became part of the complex ethnic tapestry. This gradual disappearance is a story of loss and transformation. The story of resistance mentioned earlier deserves more attention. The Vietnamese fought off multiple Mongol invasions. The Mamluks defeated the Mongols at Ain Jalut. The Japanese, aided by storms, repelled Mongol fleets. These were not passive victims, but active resistors. Their stories are inspiring, but they are often overshadowed by the narrative of Mongol dominance. There is also the untold story of the Mongols' own understanding of their empire. How did they see themselves? As conquerors, as unifiers, as instruments of divine will? The sources, mostly written by non-Mongols, give us outsider perspectives. The Mongol voice, their own interpretation of their actions, is faint. We have fragments, but not a complete picture. Another untold story is that of the long-term survivors. In regions devastated by the Mongols, some people endured. They rebuilt. They carried on. Their resilience is remarkable, but it is rarely the focus of historical narratives. We remember the destruction, but we should also remember the reconstruction. Finally, there is the untold story of what did not happen. Historians focus on what did occur, but the paths not taken are also revealing. What if Genghis had died young? What if the Mongols had failed to unify? What if they had not invaded China or Central Asia? These counterfactuals help us understand how contingent history is. Genghis Khan's success was not inevitable. Many things had to go right for him to achieve what he did. Recognizing this contingency reminds us that history is shaped by choices, luck, and circumstance, not by fate. The untold stories of the Mongol Empire are endless. For every documented event, there are thousands of undocumented ones. For every prominent figure, there are millions of ordinary people whose stories are lost. History is written by the literate, the powerful, and the survivors. Everyone else is forgotten. But their experiences mattered, their lives mattered. And in telling the story of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, we must remember that we are only scratching the surface of a vast and complex reality. We have journeyed through the life of Genghis Khan, from his birth on the banks of the Onon River to his death on campaign in Xixia. We have explored the culture that produced him, the military machine he built, and the empire he forged. We have examined his legacy, both the destruction he caused and the connections he created. And we have grappled with the question of how to remember a figure so complex, so contradictory, so monumental. Genghis Khan was a man of his time, shaped by the brutal realities of the Mongolian steppe. But he was also a visionary who transcended his circumstances. He took a scattered, impoverished people and turned them into a world-conquering force. He established laws that emphasized merit over birth, tolerance over dogma, and order over chaos. He connected East and West in ways that had never been possible before, setting the stage for the modern globalized world. But this legacy came at a terrible cost. Millions died in his campaigns. Cities were razed. Cultures were destroyed. The suffering caused by the Mongol conquest is almost impossible to comprehend. Genghis Khan was not a hero in any simple sense. He was a conqueror, a destroyer, a builder, and a lawgiver. He was all of these things, and we must hold all of them in mind when we remember him. Today, more than 8 centuries after his death, Genghis Khan remains a towering figure in world history. In Mongolia, he is celebrated as the founder of the nation. In the rest of the world, he is remembered variously as a barbarian, a genius, a monster, and a visionary. All of these characterizations contain elements of truth. Genghis Khan cannot be reduced to a single label. He is too large, too complex, too important. What is certain is that the world Genghis Khan created, the connections he forged, the systems he established, these have shaped the course of human history. The Silk Road trade networks, the spread of technologies and ideas, the blending of cultures, all of these owe something to the Mongol Empire. The modern world, with its global economy, its cultural exchanges, and its interconnected challenges, is in some ways a descendant of the world Genghis Khan built. As we look back on his life, we are confronted with fundamental questions about power, violence, leadership, and human nature. Can greatness be separated from brutality? Can we admire someone's achievements while condemning their methods? Can historical figures be judged by the standards of their time, or should they be held to universal moral principles? These questions have no easy answers. They force us to think deeply about what we value and why. Genghis Khan's story is also a reminder of the impermanence of empires. The Mongol Empire, vast and powerful as it was, eventually fragmented and faded. The great conquerors are remembered, but their empires do not last forever. This is a humbling lesson for any who aspire to power. Nothing endures unchanged. All empires fall. All leaders are eventually forgotten, except in the pages of history books. Yet Genghis Khan endures in ways that transcend politics and borders. He endures as a symbol of what human will and ambition can achieve. He endures as a cautionary tale about the costs of conquest. He endures as a figure of fascination, inspiring books, films, and endless debate. He endures because his story, for all its darkness, is also a story of survival, of rising from nothing, of changing the world. The untold story of Genghis Khan is not just about facts and dates. It is about the human capacity for both creation and destruction. It is about the choices we make and the consequences that ripple through history. It is about the tension between individual ambition and collective good. It is about power, its uses and abuses, its allure and its dangers. As we close this journey through the life and legacy of Genghis Khan, we are left with more questions than answers. But perhaps that is as it should be. History is not a neat narrative with clear lessons. It is messy, complicated, and endlessly fascinating. Genghis Khan, more than most historical figures, embodies this complexity. He was extraordinary in both his achievements and his cruelty. He changed the world, for better and worse. The story of Genghis Khan is the story of humanity writ large. It is a story of survival against impossible odds, of ambition that knows no bounds, of violence and creation intertwined. It is a story that continues to resonate because it touches on universal themes: power, identity, legacy, and the question of what it means to be human. Genghis Khan is gone, his empire long collapsed, but his shadow stretches across the centuries. Every time we trace the roots of global trade, every time we marvel at cultural synthesis, every time we grapple with the ethics of power, we are in some way dealing with his legacy. The world he helped create is the world we inhabit, and understanding him, in all his complexity, helps us understand ourselves and the world we have inherited. This has been the untold story of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire. Not untold because it was unknown, but untold because no single telling can capture the full truth. His story is vast, encompassing continents and centuries, touching billions of lives. We have explored only a fraction of it, but perhaps we have shed light on aspects of this story that are often overlooked. The human cost, the cultural complexity, the contradictions, and the enduring questions. Genghis Khan was a man who became a legend. The legend has often obscured the man, but beneath the myths, there was a real person, a boy who nearly starved, a young man who survived betrayal and captivity, a leader who united his people, a conqueror who reshaped the world, and a man who in the end was mortal like all of us. His body returned to the earth, his tomb hidden, his legacy debated forever. As we reflect on his life, we are reminded that history is made by people, not abstract forces, not inevitable trends, but individuals making choices in specific moments. Genghis Khan made choices that changed everything. His story challenges us to think about the choices we make, the legacies we leave, and the world we create. In that sense, the story of Genghis Khan is not just about the past. It is about the present and the future. It is about us. The steppes of Mongolia remain much as they were in Genghis Khan's time. The wind still sweeps across the grasslands. Herders still tend their flocks, living in gurs, following ancient rhythms. The Onon River still flows, cold and clear. And somewhere in these lands, perhaps beneath a mountain, perhaps in a hidden valley, the body of Genghis Khan rests, guarded by silence and time. But his spirit, his impact, his legacy, these are not hidden. They are everywhere. In the cities connected by trade, in the technologies that spread from east to west, in the genetic code of millions, in the memory of nations, in the pages of history books, in the stories we tell about power and ambition, about survival and conquest, about the capacity of one person to change the world. Genghis Khan rose from nothing and conquered everything. He unified the Mongols, built the largest contiguous empire in history, and connected civilizations in unprecedented ways. He was brutal and brilliant, ruthless and pragmatic, feared and respected. He was a man of contradictions, a figure who defies simple categorization, and he was, above all, unforgettable. This has been the untold story of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire. We hope it has given you new insights into this extraordinary figure and the world he created. History is not just about dates and battles. It is about people, their choices, and their consequences. Genghis Khan's choices echo through the centuries, shaping the world we live in today. If this journey through history has captivated you, if you've found yourself drawn into the epic tale of the Mongol Empire, we invite you to continue exploring. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the lives of history's most fascinating figures. Give this video a like if you found it informative and thought-provoking, and share it with others who might be interested in the untold stories of our past. History is a conversation across time. The past speaks to us, and we interpret its messages. Genghis Khan's story is one of the most powerful in human history. It challenges us, disturbs us, and amazes us. It reminds us of what humans are capable of, the heights of achievement and the depths of cruelty. And it asks us to think carefully about the legacies we create and the world we leave behind. Thank you for joining us on this journey across the steppes, through the campaigns, and into the heart of the Mongol Empire. The story of Genghis Khan is eternal because it speaks to fundamental truths about human nature and history. As long as people seek to understand power, leadership, and the forces that shape civilizations, the story of Genghis Khan will endure. From the windswept steppes of Mongolia to the farthest reaches of the empire he built, the name Genghis Khan still resonates. It is a name that changed the world, and the world in turn has never forgotten him. This is the untold story of Genghis Khan, or rather, one version of it, because his story, like all great stories, can never be fully told. It lives on in memory, in legend, and in the ongoing conversation between past and present. Until next time, keep exploring, Keep questioning and keep seeking the stories that shape our understanding of who we are and where we come from. History is not dead. It lives in us. And the story of Genghis Khan, the boy from the steppe who conquered the world, lives on forever.